The supranational entities such as the IMF and the BIS have concluded that a global economic collapse is looming in the distance. They have made that official. Their solutions, however, are not what would favor humanity. During the crisis, our current monetary system will become entirely vulnerable to a complete collapse, wreaking havoc on the global economy. The BIS and IMF have suggested that eliminating sovereignty and aligning under a unified currency is the solution. What do you think? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at what has happened in the markets. I want to give you the details on that. I want to show you where the risks lie. Then I want to give you the actual words directly from the IMF and the BIS and see what their solutions are. I want to show you what has happened with currencies worldwide and so much more. So let's begin by taking a look at the markets. This is right now, as I record this video, in the middle of the day on Thursday's trading session. You can see it has been a volatile day, up and down. The Dow Jones, as I record this, is negative 128. You're looking at all of the markets right now in the red to some degree. It's not really that serious of a fall as expected. We are seeing uncertainty after the Federal Reserve essentially said that we are going to stop with what we're doing and we are going to continue our policy here of quantitative tightening. Some are worried, some are saying we don't have to worry for a while. Ray Dalio said don't worry about it, therefore we don't have to worry about it, and so on. David Tepper, Fed is done supporting the stock prices, so cash is not so bad as an investment. David Tepper emails to CNBC saying Powell basically told you the Fed put is dead. And people need to pay attention to what's happening right now, not just what the Federal Reserve is doing, but what all central banks are doing, and that is a global concerted quantitative tightening policy. Looking at this chart, it tells us where the risks are building. Risk taking picks up. Leverage loan and bond volumes grow. You can see the chart from 2003 up until present day, but focusing from the financial crisis up until today, you can see that this has increased and to a dramatic degree as well. On the right hand side, collateralized loan obligations, CLOs. This is from 2013 up until present, and this has also grown. All of the risks are being consistently multiplied and the public is unaware. Of course, they don't know what a CLO is. They just go to the bank, they just do their thing, they get their 9-to-5 job paycheck and they're just consuming as they normally would, living their lives. But secretly behind the scenes, there are derivatives that are being created right now that are essentially putting gasoline on the fire, and the risks which were highlighted in 2008 are only getting worse. So that brings me to my next point, where we're going to be talking about the IMF and the BIS, and it's extremely serious to see it all being laid out for you right in front of our very eyes. The multilateral response. We should prepare for the possibility that weaker national tools may mean limited effectiveness and thus may result in greater reliance on multilateral responses and on the global financial safety net. And essentially what they're saying here is that we need to gather together to be able to fund the IMF so that we can have our own way of bailing out countries. And by bailing out countries, what they really mean is strangling countries that they decide the terms of which. Look at the Troika in Greece as an example of this, how they completely destroyed the country. The IMF's lending capacity was increased, hold that thought for a moment, during the global financial crisis to about $1 trillion. A forceful response from the membership at a time of dire need. One lesson from the crisis was that the IMF went into it under-resourced. We should try to avoid that next time around. Now we're looking at the IMF and what had happened throughout the crisis, and they were essentially going into these countries, bailing them out, giving them terms that were impossible to pay back, and so they could decide what happens within the country and make sure that they are being controlled by these supranational supranational entities, that is the goal. Essentially what they want is to have global governance, as they say. Don't put a T at the end of that because of course that scares people. So we call it global governance, just as people like Gordon Brown and so many other individuals have coined the term. But what we see here is that this has been the goal all along, to be able to control countries from a higher level. Not within the country, of course. You can sit above the country in a supranational entity, whether it's the IMF, whether it's the BIS, whether it's the World Bank, or so many others that will be created in the future. But all I know is that they have been slowly but surely inching closer and closer on your sovereignty, and most people don't give a damn, but I certainly do. They talk about how at the G20 they were so wonderful in coming together to suggest that we're going to work together on fixing the problems. We're going to fund the IMF, we're going to throw more money at it, and it's going to be part of their goal of new multilateralism, one that is dedicated to improving the lives of all this world's citizens. Of course, that's the words that they use, but regardless, let's try and figure out what the problems are and let's just eliminate them. And central banks would be a good start. So then they get into more details of this. I don't want you to fall asleep, but essentially you see where I'm going. Now we're going to look at the BIS. Special consideration should be given to giving the SDR a greater role. The SDR has the features and potential to act as a, and this is their quote, super sovereign reserve currency. Moreover, an increase in SDR allocation would help the fund address its resource problem and the difficulty in voice and representation. They're looking at this right now, talking about forcefully having countries increase the power of the IMF's SDR. The scope of using the SDR should be broadened so as to enable it to fully satisfy the member countries' demand for a reserve currency. Set up a settlement system between the SDR and other currencies. Therefore, the SDR, which is now only used between governments and international institutions, could become a widely accepted means of payment in international trade and financial transactions. Actively promote the use of SDR in international trade, commodities pricing, investment, and corporate bookkeeping. This will help enhance the role of the SDR and will effectively reduce the fluctuation of prices of assets denominated in national currencies and related risks. They're basically saying, let's go away from the US dollar, let's use the IMF SDR instead. Some people could argue that that's a good thing to get away from the US dollar hegemony and allow it to be more international. That is definitely understandable, but we need somewhere, somehow, that somebody has to take responsibility for it, and you use a process of voting, and we have governments in this process, and today we give up everything to supranational entities. That's the danger. At least we have a process that's put in place where you have people who are elected and then they make decisions hopefully in your best interest. When you give up control to an international organization, they don't have your best interest at heart, and an international currency is never ever a good thing. And the US dollar is flawed. This whole currency is a disaster. But creating something like this is even worse. And of course, it's already there. They don't need to conjure something new up. They're basically just saying, hey, let's use this. So it goes into more detail. I wanted to cover another speech that was put out here. We also need to improve our ability to manage crises. In Europe, the global financial crisis created the political will for further progress in financial integration, including banking union. There is a lender of last resort, the ESM, with an innovative toolkit. However, we also need an effective lender of last resort with global reach. Unfortunately, there has been limited progress in scaling up the IMF's core resources. Without this, the global safety net remains incomplete. I have talked about this from the time that I released my book up until present day. Everything has been laid out for those who have been subscribed to the channel and who have been seeing that I have been completely open about what they are doing today. The IMF and the BIS are talking about it, and we need to pay close attention to what they are saying. Look at this article from 2012, IMF doubles lending capacity. We remember that that, the global financial crisis occurred, then the euro sovereign debt crisis, the IMF comes out, they increase their lending capacity. Every country is so happy and so wonderful after that. If you look at my book, my first book, The Money GPS, at the bottom of page 68, the IMF's power will increase as the crisis worsens. This was published in January of 2012, written in between 2010 and 2011, but I published it January 2012. That's when it was put in print officially. So you're looking at this right now, seeing it, and how did I know that this would happen? It was pretty obvious. They're giving up more and more control to the IMF, and then we see that they doubled their capacity. We see today in 2018 that they're asking for more, and they don't only want more power, they don't want a bigger voice, they want a unified global currency that is used in countries transacting with each other to be used just as all other currencies are, and make it the global reserve currency of the world. This has been their goal from the beginning, and it is foolish to think otherwise. By the way, on this page at the very top, I wrote this book prior to the second bailout of Greece, and you can see right here, a second round of bailouts for Greece is needed. Despite the billions given during the first round, it wasn't enough. It will continue. I talk about how they're just going to need more and more and more. If you want the financial education that was not taught to you in school, these two books have it all. You can get everything you need to know about the IMF, about central banks, so much more to check out. Look at the link in the description. You'll be taken over to Amazon where you can actually flip through the pages of the book for yourself. If you're more interested in the audiobook version, you can get that at themoneygps.com.